Okay, welcome to RhapsodyCast, episode 7. We did it.
We did it! What'd we do?
Made it to 7 episodes. My name is Matthew.
My name's Nate.
And I'm Travis.
Whoa, new guy.
New guy! Hi, Travis.
What's up?
How you doing, Travis?
Pretty good. I'm excited.
Travis is one of my coworkers. I mentioned I have a number of coworkers that listen to the show. And he
Boss.
Boss.
I'm his boss.
He is one of my bosses, yes.
Okay. What if you hate his story? Are you gonna get fired?
Nah, dude, he ain't do shit.
I can't. I can make fun of him a lot. What I do anyway.
It's not gonna change nothing.
Right.
So I invited Travis because he sounded really interested even before the show started. When I was just telling him the idea, he thought it was fun. So I've invited him to do a guest time here with us. And hopefully he's got a great story and we'll all enjoy it.
Yeah.
If not, we'll still listen to it and then golf clap appropriately.
Right. I will give a hearty golf clap.
So, this week the prompt was Damsels in Distress. Nate, tell us what inspired your story this week.
I am always bad at telling what inspires my story because... Oh! I know what inspired my story. I was like, fuck damsels in distress. I don't know, is damsel specifically a girl? I feel like...
Yeah.
I looked up the definition. It's actually a young unmarried woman.
There you go. I was like, I want to change it around, so I did it.
Oh.
That's what kind of started it. And
turned it on its ear.
It started it, and then with that I was like, oh, and I want to bring this character into it, and then do that, and that'll be cool. But then I got serious writer's block halfway through. We'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
I don't know. He's worried. I'm not worried.
I'm worried.
I always enjoy anything Nate produces, so I'm not that worried about him.
My story, I'm gonna warn you, not as stupid. Well, maybe.
I've found Nate's stories to be just a bundle of hilarity.
Oh, thank you.
It's actually pretty funny.
So Travis, what inspired your story?
My story, there's a couple things. I mean, I know about Game of Thrones. I don't watch it.
Yeah.
But I saw a couple pictures about the houses.
Okay.
And I figured I'd like that concept and I'd like to work with it. So I did that sort of, and they're houses, but they're not like royal houses filled with, royal people. No, they're just more a mixture of guilds and houses. So I went with that, sort of, and that's sort of at the end, but that's the main concept of my story, I guess.
Cool. I guess with that...
But what inspired your story, Matt?
Yeah, you can't just skip yourself.
I want to skip myself because what inspired my story will be so obvious 2 paragraphs in, and you guys will be like, "Oh yeah," or will be like, "Really?" And so I'm gonna just let that slide, and then you'll see exactly what inspired me as soon as I get into my story.
All right, my prompt was damsels in distress and a fauna of sorts. You remember that? Flora. Fauna's different. Fauna's
one's an animal, one's a plant.
Oh, yeah, no, I did both. Whatever.
That's fine.
I covered
my story
bases.
Also has fauna in it because
it needed to.
I've got humans and other things.
All right. So my story is called Baron von Vince's Bad Day.
Uh-oh.
So you want to know how I got here, eh? I can't possibly share every detail of my story, so I'll try to keep it short. Oh, of course, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Baron von Vince. I hold no true position in society, especially now, but throughout the years I have come to adopt the title through my friends and colleagues. Whenever we met, they would simply call me the Baron. I've quite taken a liking to the name. I think it suits me now.
It's like the governor from
Walking Dead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I've always liked that concept.
Anyhow, my story begins with an orc named Damsel. Damsel Ragehammer.
That's a good orc name.
Don't be so easily fooled by his surname. Damsel was not a creature of wrath or malice, and was nearly incapable of violence.
Oh no, it's a weird orc trait.
It is a weird orc trait. He spent his days traveling throughout the towns in Smithdale, wooing women and entertaining people. Damsel was truly the life of the party wherever he went. He was a playboy, entrepreneur, philanthropist, professional wine drinker, and poet. Now, I am not a jealous man. No, sir. I'm truly humble without fault, but something about him made me writhe with hate. It was his hair. Damsel had, without a doubt, the best, most silken, smoothest, flawless hair ever. Not only for an orc, but for any of the races.
Man, I want to kiss this guy.
Yeah.
His smooth hair.
He's super smooth. He goes around wooing everybody. Not a single elf on Terrantania could compete with Damsel's silken locks glowing in the crisp autumn sunlight. Clearly this orc's hair was the source of his charismatic power. The blonde waves crashing onto his shoulders and down his back set off a trance-like state in most people. From the moment I saw his beautiful head of hair, I knew I had to add his head to my collection.
Uh-oh.
That's pretty brutal.
My collection is, in my humble opinion, the greatest assemblage of only the rarest trinkets and artifacts in Tarantinian history.
Including hair?
Including beautiful hair.
It's the most silken and beautiful hair in all of the land.
Anything you could imagine, from a secret library of forbidden books to shattered remains of armor of the gods. I take great pride in my work, and I've spent many years amassing my massive hoard. The means by which I obtained my collections weren't always, how you would say, legal. But I don't want to divulge all that. Not yet, anyway. Not here. I sent my 2 best men to obtain my new mantelpiece. I kindly asked them to bring Damsel to me alive. I love to hear my prey weep and beg for their lives before I cut it short and send them to my personal taxidermist. So I'll cut to the chase. My men were successful in capturing the beautiful orc man. I met with him in my trophy room. His hair nearly hypnotized me, but I shook it off. "Welcome," I said. "What do you think of my collection, Damsel?" "Who are you?" he whimpered. "Where am I?" I asked you my question first. "It, looks nice." "Nice?" I shouted. Imagine the gall to say my collection was nice. I took out my rapier and gave him a good slash across the back, making sure not to harm his face. I kicked him, sending him straight into one of my trophies. He held on to catch his fall. "Don't touch that! That is a mount of the face of Lord Zordis, in mint condition."
The old man Zordis. he hungers.
"Do you know how long it took me to catch that freak? He has teleporting powers." He stumbled away from the giant face onto one of my owl plants.
Ah, it's flora and fauna.
His force knocked one of the plant pods, falling to the ground. The pod broke and an owl flew out of it. "You ruined a perfectly good owl! That one wasn't ripe!"
Oh no.
I slashed him again with my sword. "What do you have to say for yourself?" The beaten orc didn't say anything. "You certainly aren't as great a guest as I imagined, after hearing all of the great fun you seem to drum up wherever you go. It's a shame, really. I was hoping to keep you alive a little longer." As I rolled the orc over onto his back and placed my rapier on the flesh near his heart, I heard a knock at the door. Oh, for the love of... I trailed off. I walked down the long hallway of trophies, but before I could reach the door, a giant Woolgon broke it down!
Woolgons!
Yes.
That's like the third time.
I like my Woolgons.
You gotta explain what Woolgons are. We haven't gotten into a description.
I haven't?
Not on the podcast.
Oh, no!
I've never
Okay.
heard 'em.
Like, they
Woolgons.
were mentioned in the fairy story, which I couldn't ask because we were doing a no-talking, and then it was mentioned in the story before that.
The Woolgon pelts.
Yeah, the Woolgon pelts were in the Bad News Barbarians. And
Right.
I didn't catch it until I was editing later.
Right. No,
So
Woolgons are like beastly. They're basically wolves and dragons, but they're like giant wolves with wings. The Woolgon stood in front of me and lowered its head. Sitting atop was a young lady dressed in battle armor and wielding a giant sharpened wrench. I know you, I gulped. You're that racer! Meryl, she stated. You stole my enchantercraft and I'm here to reclaim it. The Woolgon bucked and... I guess he's a little horsey too.
Well, she's riding him.
Yeah. The Woolgon bucked and knocked me back. It raced through the hallway, its massive size knocking down everything in its path.
It's ruining the collection.
You can imagine how I felt. Everything was out of order.
Oh, no.
Priceless artifacts and art pieces were broken and torn. To this day, I can't explain how she got past my guards and through my trap-riddled fortress. At this point, I didn't care about Damsels anymore. I just wanted them both gone so I could start rebuilding. I had a plan if just such a thing happened, you know. I scrambled to the center of the hallway and opened a hidden compartment on the ground. In it was an artifact so powerful and rare I've never shown it to anyone. It was the Death Scepter of... I walked into the main showroom, my scepter in hand, ready to strike. I saw Meryl helping Damsel onto her enchantercraft. I sent Death Lightning shooting towards them when the Woolgon jumped in front of the blast. Princess! I heard her shout. The Woolgon fell into a massive heap on the ground.
The mighty power of the almost human Woolgon.
Oh, yes. The Woolgon fell into a massive heap on the ground and started to disintegrate. I started to charge another shot when my entire tower started to rumble. Cracks started to appear in the ceiling. Soon the whole ceiling was ripped off, and I could see him. It was Titanimos, the Death Titan.
Oh, man.
Titanimos stood taller than my skyscraping tower. Baron von Vince, his voice boomed. You cannot escape me this time. He lowered his hand next to Meryl and Damsels so that they were able to ride on top. With his other hand, he created a fist and proceeded to crush my tower into dust. And then I woke up here with you. Baron von Vince finished his tale and met eyes with his patient listener standing in the shadows. So Meryl is the cause of all of this. Baron nodded and looked around, frightened by the hellish landscape. Don't worry about her. A devilish laugh boomed throughout the lair. The literal devil stepped out of the shadows. I have plans for her. To be continued!
Whoa! First to be continued. Start of an arc.
Yeah.
Wow.
What'd you think?
It wasn't what I expected, but it was better.
Better than you expected!
It was more serious than the other ones, but that didn't actually make it worse.
Cool.
Yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you want fun, sometimes you want interesting.
Yeah.
That was definitely interesting.
Yay!
I was trying to lead you. I don't know if you noticed that. I specifically gave you 2 prompts, hoping that you would do a story about Mario.
What?
I wanted your flora to be PD piranhas,
No.
or mushrooms, or
No.
fire flowers.
I like my owl plants.
Owl plants, even cooler than anything in Mario. Like, all of Mario.
You have no idea how off the cuff I am when I write. Like,
Yeah.
I have no, like, I don't know. Like, I was gonna have, like, Meryl bust in and be like, I got magic plant stuff. Like, put you to sleep. And then I was like, nah, that's not good. And then owl plants
Owl
just happened.
plants. That's so good. I'm very pleased with owl plants. That one wasn't ripe.
Yeah.
It's like
it just seems like he stuffed an owl in a potted And then it broke, and the owl was like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I'm out of here.
Maybe he's just deranged, and that's not how owls work at all.
That's exactly what I got from that.
Who plants an owl?
Alright, once again, I'm Travis. If you guys forgot, which you probably would have. Anyways, my prompt was vampires, my unique prompt. And the shared prompt was, once again, Damsel in Distress. The title for my story is The Forgotten House by Travis Shorter.
I'm just going to leave it in every time he says his name.
That's just cheating, said Nico, looking behind him as he and a regally dressed Alice bolted down the newly burning street. Can you manage not to ruin one job? Just one job, Nico. I'm very tired of running for my life instead of getting paid, and this dress is not helping me aerodynamically, said Alice as she started hacking at her tan, loosely fitting, jewel-encrusted ball gown to help with her running. She and Nico were currently running down the street of a city called Vec. This was mostly a quiet city except for today, because today was a day of celebration. Vec was in the middle of nowhere with very little resources of its own, so it had to rely on its more powerful neighbors. To ensure this continued support of one such land to the south, the current ruler of Vec had decided to marry his daughter to the neighboring land of Arkcoven, a place overflowing with many magic users. Unfortunately, Nico and Alice's job involved doing something about this, which they did, or tried to anyway. An ear-splitting roar pierced the night as the ground shook. A stone humanoid creature that stood 20 feet tall bumbled down the maze of streets towards Nico and Alice. It was wreathed in flame and consumed by anger. It was too big to run full speed and not crash into any buildings at even the slightest curve, which was only one of the reasons for its considerable amount of rage. In its anger, it continued to breathe flames towards Nico and Alice, but the maze of buildings and twists and turns always offered protection. What the hell is that thing anyway? Nico shouted while jumping over a weirdly well-placed fruit cart. They're a product of the Archmagicians. The scrolls used to animate them make them souped-up golems. Basically just a more pissed-off version of the original, said Alice, as if none of this fazed her in the slightest. She seemed to be having the easiest time of the two escaping from what Nico referred to as pant-pissing terror incarnate. Why the hell is it chasing us, Nico? 1, chasing you, and 2, because you stole the princess, said Alice, putting air quotes around the words stole and princess. They were hired by what Alice found out later after Nico took the job, a vampire that had run from his home and fell in love with the princess of Vec. The vampire's request was to break up the wedding or kidnap the princess. The failed result of both was currently barreling behind them in magically engineered fury. I didn't actually do anything. I didn't do much. On third thought, never mind, said Nico as he remembered how he was found in the princess's room. Disrobing while she was tied up in the bed could make anyone assume the worst, thought Nico. It's not like I tied her up. I was only trying to save her. And anyway, who would use these hulking monstrosities as guards? Nico asked as he pointed over his shoulder. They look like they'd go berserk at the slightest poke or joke. I don't really care who or why, Nico, but I'm bored of running. Let's end this, said Alice as she quickly started the other direction towards imminent danger. Alice, wait! You can't fight that. Actually, never mind, corrected Nico as he remembered that Alice was not an ordinary 12-year-old girl. They had been together for almost a year now. She had found him in a tavern in his usual state of slight inebriation. Slight being that he was pissed drunk and couldn't tell a mug of beer from a bowl of peanuts, and was currently drinking the latter. She didn't say much, and he only remembers receiving a lot of money from her. In return, he was supposed to protect her for as long as she needed. So far, all he'd done is watch as the girl's seemingly invincible little body produced the ability to take out one dangerous enemy after the next with deadly precision. It was starting to seem like she was the one protecting him. He grunted a few times and spit in the fire so as to reassure himself of his manliness. He stopped running and watched as Alice ran up to the monster. It caught sight of her and bellowed its flaming bellow of terror. It started for her, but as soon as it got close, Alice disappeared. Nico always thought she went invisible, but soon she told him that it wasn't magic. She just made herself less noticeable, is how she explained it. The golem slowed to a stop and looked around. As Nico watched, it appeared to come to a conclusion and started slapping at his body. Nico looked closer and watched as he noticed Alice climbing the thing with an inhuman speed and grace. She dodged the golem's hands easily and made her way up to its head. At this point, the golem swung at itself hard while aiming for Alice, momentarily forgetting where its head was. She jumped over the incoming blow, and the golem hit itself so hard it fell on its back. Alice once again landed on the golem's head with a gymnastically encouraged flourish and placed something black, round, and burning in its mouth and vaulted her way down its prone body back to Nico. "Show off," said Nico as they walked towards the exit of the city. As the golem got up, it started lumbering towards them. It had covered half the distance between it and Nico before its head violently exploded, sending rocks and scraps of paper everywhere. "I'd call this a success," Nico said happily, right before he was punched in the stomach by Alice and left on the ground. She kept walking, and Nico eventually walked after her. The next morning, as Alice and Nico came down from the room they rented in a nearby inn a few miles outside of Vec, they were met by the vampire that hired them. He had a wide, toothy grin on his face. He was covered in a bulky brown coat and a wide-brimmed hat with a thin shade hanging down around the edges. He attracted many odd stares from the patrons of the inn, but seemed oblivious to it all. He also seemed to be as oblivious to the extreme heat. "I do not know how you did it, but the wedding has been called off. Turns out the king of Arkcoven was set on fire by his own guards and left the city to tend to his wounds and his pride." Right before Nico burst into laughter, he was elbowed in the ribs by Alice. Yes, that's exactly what was supposed to happen. We always come through," said Nico, in between muffled bursts of laughter. "Right. Well, I'm truly grateful. Here's your payment of 30 gold coins. I also acquired information on the topic you wanted. It turns out that the house, stationed in the capital city of Ladenham, is run by the local rulers. I was also told that the disappearance of the House of Night was caused by the House of Worship. I was unable to ascertain the reason. I'm sorry that this is all I have, but I thank you for your helps. Goodbye." With that, the vampire left the inn, heading in the general direction of Vec. While the vampire informed them of what he had found out, Alice had a grim look on her face. She seemed disturbed by the entire report. As they ate breakfast, she still stayed completely quiet, which was a normal state for her anyway, but this silence seemed filled with thoughts that weren't entirely pleasant. As she sat, she fingered the locket around her neck. Nico had never seen her remove it, not even once, but he did catch her looking in it whenever she thought he wasn't looking. "I've always wondered, what's in that locket anyway?" said Nico, whose curiosity had finally been piqued. He thought for a moment and came to a conclusion. "You know what? There are a lot of things I need to ask you. Like, who are you really? How can you do all that stuff? Where are your parents, etc.? I don't even know how or why I took this job. I remember being pissed off my rocker, but when it comes to work, I'm not stupid, and there seems to be a lot more to your request than you let on." Alice finally looked Nico in the eyes. As she stared, Nico felt sure there were important things she was not telling him, just from the way she looked at him. It was only a few moments before she responded, but it felt longer. "You know about the houses, don't you?" As Nico shrugged, Alice continued. "Most of them are more like a mix between guilds and families. Houses are the only places most races can coexist peacefully due to the strict rules that they have. There are dozens of houses, each specializing in something all over the land. Although there are many, only 6 of them are of relative note due to their influence and or power. They are the houses of worship, creation, knowledge, war, gold, and justice. These houses all preside over some aspect of life, which can make them very influential. You can usually guess by the names which house presides over what. There used to be another house that towered above them all in terms of power and influence, the House of Night. The house was mostly made up of highly trained assassins for hire. They would only take jobs they deemed worthy because their power was too great to be misused. Even though they were assassins for hire, killing someone was not something taken lightly. Usually the victim had to have done something to get the contract accepted on them. With their power and influence, it was the House of Night that could change history. Nico sat with his lips pursed for her entire explanation. His thoughts were racing with questions and assumptions as to this girl's association with the legendary dead house. "What does any of this have to do with you?" asked Nico. "You're a child now. You couldn't have been more than a child when that house fell." "I was getting to that part. It's not a short story, nor an easy one to tell." Alice seemed unusually calm as she answered Nico's interruption, but she pressed on. "One day, almost 5 years ago, the residents of the House of Night all vanished. Their base was emptied of all living beings, but their belongings were left behind. It was like they were abducted in the span of a second during the night. Most people had whispered that it was the House of Worship's doing, due to their long-standing rivalry, but no one had any proof. Alice paused after a lengthy explanation. She started touching her locket again and looked at Nico intently as she did it, and it was like she was looking for something in his face. Let me guess, you're the one surviving member of that house. It's the only thing that could explain all the ninja crap you can pull, said Nico, punctuating his sentence with idiotic hand chops. What I don't understand is you're so young. How could you learn all that in your short life, and how did you escape? Alice got a faraway look in her eye. Her face seemed like she was remembering an experience she would rather stayed buried. There are two kinds of residents in the House of Night, one born into the house, and the ones that are taken in. The ones born into the house are called trueborn. It's usually these people who hold the highest positions in the house, such as patriarch and matriarch. The trueborn start training only weeks after they're born. The easy stuff happens while they're young. The real training begins a year after they can walk. Most trueborn never actually survive their training. 2 out of every 3 children die. Alice stopped here. She looked at her now open locket and then back at Nico. Nico, do you ever feel like you've forgotten something, or that your life isn't what it was supposed to be? She looked anxious as she asked him this, as if something was supposed to be happening now. Have I forgotten something? Nico asked, but he was sure he knew the answer. He was 34 years of age. He knew this, but lately he felt that the memories he had of his entire life just didn't seem to fit. It was like all his memories were out-of-body experiences. He had always shrugged it off as him just forgetting as time went on, but Alice's question brought on a wary feeling. I am the daughter of the previous patriarch of the house, said Alice in a monotone. No, I'm not your father. I think I would remember ruling a house. Probably, Nico said, very unsure of every word that left his mouth. No, Alice mentioned with a smile, but you are his brother. At that, she showed him the locket. In the photo were 2 men on one side and a woman on the other. Of the 2 men, one looked almost like a younger Nico, and another looked exactly like a younger Nico. He stared in disbelief. How? Nico finally choked out after a long silence. Only 2 people that I know of escaped before the disappearance of the house. You and I. My father sent me away for what was supposed to be training in the south. He hid a note in my pack saying that you were put under a powerful spell and sent out weeks before anything was going to happen in preparation for a day that he didn't explain. In his note were detailed instructions on how to find you and what to do once I did. I tried to make it home as soon as I found the note, but all I found when I got there was an empty village and a missing family. At this point, Alice looked like the 12-year-old girl she had never appeared to be, small, alone, and sad. Nothing like the trained killer Nico had come to know over the past year. So, if I'm actually someone else, then who do the memories I have now belong to? Nico's voice sounded hollow. The shock of this revelation was slowly creeping up on him. His life was a lie. Worse than that, it was probably stolen. He always thought of himself as a great thief, but this is a step too far. Your memories are of a man you and my father once knew. He was a thief, mercenary, and an extremely capable ally. My father never mentioned what happened to him, but the spell used on you requires the body of the person the memories are being copied from, alive or dead. Nico sat and thought for a moment. Since you told me this, shouldn't my actual memories be coming back? It said in the letter that the only way to get your memories back was to meet up with a friend of the family. He was a magician you had encountered when you were younger. He lives in Arkcoven. The note says that when you arrive in Arkcoven, the mage will find you. Although Nico couldn't remember any of these supposed memories Alice said he had, he felt deep down in his bones that she was right. He made a resolution here and now. He looked at Alice and decided to return his memories to help return her family, even if that required taking down the house of worship. He was always a sucker for a damsel in distress. First, said Nico, we get my memories back. That's part 1. Part 2 is where we get your family back. Your family too, mentioned Alice. Not my family. Not yet, anyway. Even so, how are we going to get our family back, said Alice, an unusual gleam in her eye. Nico smiled a devilish smile. First, we'll need knives. A lot of knives. The end.
Ooh,
Nice.
Yeah.
nice setup.
It's a good story. I like the things that we get in the story.
I like the end. I ended up changing twice because Alice's whole explanation was just one huge paragraph.
Yeah,
So I had to split that up a bit.
that's good.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's
Enjoyed
gonna
it.
make people be like, oh, I want Travis a little bit more then.
Yeah, that was the point of it.
So, my prompt was a shared prompt, of course, damsel in distress. And my unique prompt was a city in the sky. I'm going to apologize to Nate on this one. I had originally intended to have the city in the sky be a real thing and spend, half the podcast.
Are you going to put it on a bottle again?
Yeah. It's City in the Sky Brewery.
No,
I didn't. I want to say no, I didn't do that, but I kind of did.
Just let me just hear it and react.
Okay. My story's called The Case of Danny Edwards. Gooston, the city in the center, the place where dreams are made and lives are ruined. Ask anyone. This is a town of degenerate, sentient refuse. Evil cultists, soulless prostitutes, and crooked constables all line the cobblestone streets, mixing with the dross and garbage going about their miserable lives. Everyone's got a con. Everyone plays a game. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you can start your con back. Some days, it seems I'm the only straight man in town, and as long as I continue with that assumption, the easier it is to do my job. What job is that? I'm a private dick. Call me Bartholomew Magnus, P.I.
Wait! It's Bar Magnus!
It's not, it's Bartholomew Magnus! It was a warm, humid night in early autumn, just before the witching hour. I crushed the cherry of my cigarette into the overflowing ashtray on my desk, then pulled out my papers and tobacco and started rolling another. There are some folks out there who say smoking's no good for you. I always found it helped me calm my nerves. There was a lot weighing me down. I owed 16 gestures rent, and the landlady, old Ms. Byrne, had given me till the end of the week to pay, or clear out my office. And what's worse, I hadn't seen either side of a case in over 3 weeks. My coin purse was empty, and so was my stomach, and filling it with smoke was only going to help so much. What I needed was more than a case. I needed a miracle, and that's when one walked into my office.
Classic Bart Magnus.
With all her smooth curves, she looked as if she was blessed by Babslani herself. She wore a cloak so white it looked like it was spun from pure snow, and she had skin to match it. The little black dress she was poured into was only held up by one strap and a wish. Her legs were longer than the Dralgo coast, and the hair that cascaded from her head was the color of sunshine. Her eyes, an icy blue that complemented her snow-white complexion, were fixed on me intently. When she parted her ruby lips, she asked the question I was hoping for. "Are you Bartholomew Magnus, the investigator?" "Maybe." I tried to play it cool. What's the knockout like you need with a private eye?" "I need you to find someone for me," she explained. "Are you interested?" "If you're looking for a new fling, I've got a perfect man for you. Otherwise, I'm up to my ears in gigs," I lied. "But I might be able to work another case. What are you looking to pay?" "I'd wager only one of those three is true," she called my bluff. "But I'm willing to pay a silver piece a day and a gold piece tip upon completion of my case." "A silver tiara a day could solve a lot of my problems, and fast. That is, if she were good for it. With money like that on the line, I'm going to need an advance." "Of course," she obliged with a mischievous grin. Her hand disappeared under her cloak, then re-emerged a second later holding the shiniest piece of silver I ever laid eyes on. The coin was so new, I'd have sworn she pressed it there in my office. Seeing a figure like hers, I was inclined to believe she had the equipment to pull it off. Cynthia painted me a pretty picture of a brother-turned-cultist. As it turns out, a few months back, her kid brother Danny fell in with a blood cult. She didn't realize it at first, of course. A 16-year-old kid coming home at all hours of the night, dodging questions. A little annoying, sure, but not much to cause alarm. Heck, it's downright expected at that age. So, this Danny gets a little weirder, and then up and disappears without a how do you do or thanks for the years, sis. I promised to start the search first thing in the morning, and then we parted ways for the night. The next morning I took a big breakfast down at Lucy's Diner. With the change I paid the landlady. By noon I found myself walking down the main drag, a few jesters still dancing in my pocket. My first stop was at Jack's General Store, where the kid worked part-time as a shelf stocker. A sharp bell announced my presence as I entered the store. An older man with weary eyes was behind the counter. He watched with bored curiosity as I approached him. "I'm looking for Jack," I said. "I got a few questions." Jack's been dead for 10 years, the teller explained. Who are you? Bartholomew Magnus, private eye, I told him. You run this joint? As much as a general store needs running, he admitted. What can I help you with? I've been hired by Cynthia Edwards to find her brother Danny. I was told he worked here. Is that true? It was, before he decided to miss 3 shifts in a row. Him and that floozy Patricia both. If he's missing, I bet the whole store that the two of them ran off in the night. He paused, remembering himself. I don't care to know about my employees' lives, but I do remember them talking about that cult leader, Day 2. Day 2? I questioned. Yeah, he's the head of a blood cult. I hear they worship the ghost of an ancient bone dragon or something. I think some of his cultists hang around that City in the Sky bar. That's all I know on the matter. I thanked the old man, then purchased a small poke of tobacco. I was rolling a cigarette when I hit the street again. I cursed the humidity for making my paper stick together, and I hoped that the resistance wasn't a sign of things to come. 3 cigarettes later, I found myself standing under a beaten, weathered sign that said City in the Clouds. I tossed the still smoldering butt from my mouth and into the gutter, then pressed through the door. Even though the afternoon sun was high, the bar was still dark and had a misty haze to it. The room was all but empty at this hour, so with easy confidence I strode towards the bar. Behind the counter was an orcish male, 6 feet with a few inches to spare. He had dark green skin and large bulging muscles. He was wiping down mugs with his back turned to me as I approached. I cleared my throat in an attempt to draw his attention, but no such luck. With a sigh, I started my line. I heard some of Day 2's cult boys hang around here some nights. Any way you know I can get a hold of them? The orc bartender stopped wiping down his cups, but didn't turn around to tell me. We don't cater to no blood cults. Now, see, that's not what I heard, I told him. I heard little Danny Edwards and his main squeeze Patricia came here a lot. Now they're both missing. Care to explain that? This time he did turn around. He had an ugly mug, and the tusk that jutted from his lower lip looked sharpened and deadly. He pointed a thick, meaty finger at my chest before saying, I don't know nothing about no Danny or Trish. Trish, eh? Sounds kind of familiar for someone you don't know anything about. Before I could continue, I felt the hard permanence of a gun barrel press into my back.
All right, gumshoe.
A voice came from behind me.
Hands where I can see 'em.
Really?
You don't like that?
No, it's good.
The barkeep reached over the counter and took my worn and old flintlock I kept stashed inside my suit coat. He lifted it high to show the goon behind me. Then the thug led me away, one hand on my shoulder, the other on his piece. He took me through a maze of corridors and out the back door into an alleyway. He pointed me towards a carriage with 2 horses and said,
You're going for a ride, detective.
with all the subtlety of a knife in the ribs. I resisted a bit as he forced me into the car, which served only to grouch him up rather than slow him down, but I didn't care. I was pretty teed off myself. I sat down, and the muscle took the bench beside me, his old flintlock still trained on me. Hey, stick that thing somewhere else, will ya? I ventured. You got my gun. You got me in your carriage. It's okay, Clive. A slow, even voice came from across the way. I wasn't sure if this bald lunk in the dull grayed robes was sitting there when I entered, but I wasn't going to let this sudden appearance spook me. His kindly smile and relaxed demeanor soothed me, and I let my guard down for the ride. Once he noticed, he leaned forward, the shadows of his face playing for a hideous demon. Bag him, he hissed, and before I knew it, a dark bag was pulled over my face. I struggled to get the bag off, but quickly detected the sweet scent of chloroform. The world faded out like a dying campfire. I awoke in another place, another time. I took quick stock of my surroundings and didn't like what I saw. I was tied to some rough pieces of wood, maybe a pallet, suspending 20 or so feet above a large pool. The pool was filled with a boiling red liquid that I could only guess was blood. Surrounding the pool were cultists, numbering in the hundreds, all chanting trance-like, their faces pressed to the floor. I began working on an escape plan before I heard a gasp and a dame's voice praying to her own gods. Cynthia, is that you? I asked. Detective Magnus? She answered. Oh, what are we gonna do? I got a plan, follow my lead. I began shifting my weight back and forth. Cynthia figured it out pretty quickly, and before long we were swinging wide of the pool and gaining speed. The cultists were too deep in their meditations and didn't seem to notice us. Finally, the rope holding us gave way and tossed us into the crowd like some cheap book with a bad plot. We came down with my side facing the ground, into a pile of true believers. Luckily enough, the pallet we were strapped to broke and I didn't. I scrambled to my feet and rushed for the exit, dragging Cynthia behind me. "No!" she protested. "We have to find Danny." The cultists were starting to swarm around us, and we didn't have time for me to explain to her that this wasn't a tea party. We got almost halfway to the exit before we were encircled by zealots. None of them made a move, so I got ready to lay into the nearest one. But before I could start throwing jabs, the crowd parted to let in the bald priest from before, a teenage attendant on either side of him. "Danny!" Cynthia cried. It was unmistakable. Blonde hair, blue eyes, baby face. The kid on the right was a dead ringer for the bit. "Ah, yes," the priest spoke. "Young Daniel has been a tremendous help. The Brotherhood of Scrollat would like to thank the Edwards family for their contribution."
Say that again?
What?
The Brotherhood of what?
Scrollat?
Scrollat.
Scrollat?
Scrollat.
Scrollat? The Brotherhood of Scrollat would like to thank the Edwards family for their contribution. "Only one problem with that day, too," I said. "The kid's family wants him back." "Oh," the cultist leader said with fake surprise. "Did you hear that, Daniel? Your family wants you back." "But I don't want to leave," the kid pleaded. "I'm afraid you must," the kook explained. This conversation smelled like week old fish. "Okay," Danny said. My hopes were high, but my expectations weren't, which is why I didn't gasp when the kid pulled a long, wicked dagger out of his robes. "Hey, what are you doing with that knife, kid?" I barely got the sentence out before he showed me, bearing the thing hilt deep between his two ribs. His sis and I rushed to him, but it didn't matter. He was gone before he hit the ground. "Blood for the god feast," the priest said, and his cronies echoed him. "This evening's sacrifice is over. You are free to leave now." I balled up my fists, ready to spill some more blood for this god feast thing. Then I felt Cynthia's small, warm hands cover mine. "Let's go," she said, on the verge of a breakdown. I wrapped an arm around her waist for support, and we walked out of there, tail between our legs. Well, that was the case of Danny Edwards. Cynthia tried to pay me the gold crown, but I refused. Didn't seem right, considering she had found him before I did. With the last few gestures, I bought a nice bottle of bourbon whiskey. Failed cases always leave me with a bad taste in my mouth.
Man.
The end.
That was real Sin City-like.
That was noir as crap. Man, I haven't seen a good noir film in a while.
I don't think I've seen any.
Wow.
It was a good story, Matt.
Thanks.
You know what I was a little upset, though?
What?
No panda reference.
Nah. That's a reference to Bart Magnus. Is a character I created 8-9 years ago. And he is a you know, I wanted to write detective stories just to try my hand at it. And so I created this character, Bart Magnus. I wrote 1 or 2 stories, and then Nate and I went through a phase where we started making short movies.
It was a bad phase.
Oh, it was fun.
It was the best.
And we made a Bart Magnus short.
Yep.
Because, you know, we were running out of ideas, or we just really liked that idea.
Yeah, we put that on Vimeo.
Yeah, it's up on the internet.
But
I'm gonna link it on my Twitter.
Okay.
If you care to find it, you can go to my Twitter, my personal Twitter @FridleySent, and it'll be there.
But the funny thing, do you remember why we put it on Vimeo? It was
because YouTube had limits and stuff.
Yeah,
didn't
it didn't have good enough quality for what we wanted to do. And now it's like YouTube, you can get 1080p. And they're going to be doing 60 frames a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that.
Back in the day, YouTube, before Google bought them
Right.
and put all the Google money behind them,
Right.
YouTube had very strict file size limits, lengths, and quality limits. And Nate and I were shooting on a pretty nice camera for the time.
Yeah.
It's like
That was pretty good.
it was $400 or $600 camera at the time.
I didn't buy it.
You didn't buy. I bought it.
You bought it?
like
Oh, yeah. I thought that was your mom's. I forgot.
no, I bought that.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
Because whenever Nate and I get into a project, I start throwing all of my money at it.
Yep.
And sometimes it works out, RhapsodyCast, and sometimes it doesn't. So, yeah.
I miss movies.
Really? I don't know. The movies were a lot more work and a lot lower quality, I feel. But, to get back to the story.
Go on.
The Bart Magnus one, we were going through a very silly phase, And so it's like an old-time detective story, but then also has ninjas, and the mob boss at the end is a panda.
Yep. We had a panda costume for that.
I have a furry friend, and I borrowed his panda costume.
That is creepy.
You can make fun of him at work for that.
For having a furry friend? It's...
Alright, fine.
I don't know. Okay, that was our stories for this week, episode 7. For next week, a little bit different. Nate is talking about taking a few weeks off.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. You can hold him to that, because I'm gonna.
Yeah.
And for that time, Travis has offered to fill in for Nate.
Yay!
Thank you, by the way.
So we can keep going, so we don't have to have like a big gap where there's nothing so quick into the early episodes. So for next week, Travis, it's your shared prompt. What would you decide?
For you mean your unique prompt?
Shared prompt for both of us.
Oh, shared prompt. Fallen Gods. That's right.
Fallen Gods. And then for you, I give you the unique prompt of slaves.
Oh, I can deal with that.
Yeah.
I can deal with that.
It's pretty common fantasy theme.
And for you, I gave Living Mountain.
A living mountain.
Yes, Living Mountain. I don't know. I was in a Hercules mood.
That's funny. I came up with slaves after watching Conan, and there's like this huge scene where he becomes a slave, and then they just don't address it. Like he's a slave, and he kills a bunch of dudes,
Yeah.
and then he's just not a slave.
Yep.
It's so weird.
They're like, you killed enough people to not be a slave.
I wish I knew that was all it took.
That's all it takes, man. Okay. So we'll bring that episode to you next week, episode 8, Travis and I, instead of Nate and I. So I guess for this week, that's the free fantasy for your ear holes.